Hi guys, welcome to the very first podcast for ADHD Ireland, hosted by me, Lauren McBride, or Her Thoughts in Bright Colours on Instagram. I hope we're all well. Over the course of this podcast, we're going to discuss all aspects of ADHD in an honest way, as we have lived with ADHD our whole lives. Some of us were diagnosed sooner than later, and some of us aren't diagnosed formally at all. This gives a wide variety of experiences from all different perspectives. Please listen at your own discretion, as we are coming from a place of personal experiences. Some topics may be sensitive to listeners, so please be advised that our opinions and lives may not directly correlate with your experiences living with ADHD. During these podcasts, people living with ADHD or who have experience with ADHD in their familial, platonic, or romantic relationships will be joining me over Zoom. Thank you to everyone who is and will be involved. We couldn't do it without you. I'm super excited to be hosting this podcast. Thank you to ADHD Ireland for giving me the opportunity to do something that I love. And with that, let's chat. Hi everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Chat ADHD. Today I have a very special guest, a very close friend of mine, Becca. We're going to be chatting about all things related to neurodiversity as a whole, as well as also be talking about our friendship as two people who are neurodiverse. Becca is a fabulous mental health advocate, and she also strives to educate people on what it's like to be neurodiverse today. She volunteers often with Spun Out, a mental health organisation in Ireland, and she's even thinking about starting her own mental health page. So, Becca, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit and also talk about what neurodiversity means to you in your life?
Hi, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here. I have so much to talk about when it comes to neurodiversity. So, what it means to me, actually, it's a pretty new term to me, surprisingly. I've only heard the term recently, and I love it because I never really thought about the connection between ADHD and autism and other conditions like that. And I just think it gives a real sense of community, and I love it because
Yeah.
there's just so many different people with so many different things going on, but we all have that one thing in common.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you feel that oh Jesus, my dogs, one sec. Okay, we're back. How do you feel that learning the term, do you feel like it represents you? Do you feel comfortable with the term in general?
Yeah, definitely, because I love that it's a new term to use, like, because sometimes you feel awkward saying I have autism, but saying I'm neurodiverse is kind of more like they don't ask questions or say, no, you're not.
Yeah, it's kind of a nice blanket term, isn't it? It's kind of in a nicer way of being like, okay, don't ask me anything else. I don't really want to talk about it right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. It's kind of self-explanatory, or you can go Google it if you want.
Yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes we're not really ready to talk about it, but sometimes I guess, we're open to educate people on what it is. And I know that you do that a lot. You do so much work with Spun Out. How many videos and articles have you written for them actually?
I've done one video and I've done 4 other articles so far.
And did you enjoy working with them?
Can we change that to how I mispronounced articles?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I've done one video and 4 articles. Oh my God, Lauren, sorry.
Keep going, you're grand.
I've done one video and 4 articles. I know. I've written 4 pieces so far.
Okay, and did you enjoy working for them?
Yes, definitely. I love that there's an outlet where I can just express myself because I've always loved writing. I've written poetry about mental health and everything like that. And I came across Spun Out, and it's for, I think, 16 to 25-year-olds. So I just
Wow,
turned
yeah.
25. So this will be my last year writing for them. So that's why I'm hoping to kind of see if there's anything I can look into next.
Well, I feel that cutting you off at 25 is a bit extreme, because I'm sure the people who run the organization, would they be older?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like even there's like it's a big organization, so the people who run it would be older. It's just the people who they get pieces from and do videos with are under 25 because it's
Well,
for
it sounds
young
like,
people.
yeah, no, I understand. It sounds like you've done a lot for them though. And your video was amazing, by the way. The one I
Thank
saw,
you.
You spoke so, so well, and that's why it's so great to have you on today. I noticed you talked a lot about autism and a lot about the first time that you got your diagnosis and how you kind of were maybe a bit in shock and you didn't know so much about it. So now, compared to what you were like back then, do you feel comfortable with the diagnosis? Are you happier in yourself now?
Yeah, 100%. But even this time last year, I'm a lot more confident with it than I was. And even since I did the video, I've learned so
Mhm.
much more about myself.
Yeah.
I think I understand it even more than I did then. So I'm constantly learning more and more about myself. And I've always thought, well, not always, but at the first few years, I thought, no way, it's not autism. Because everyone, not everyone, but it is stigmatized, and even I
Yeah.
stigmatized it myself. So
Yes.
I wasn't relating to it.
Hmm.
But as I grow older and I kind of see more signs in myself and I'm more open to it, I think, do you know what? Yeah, I am autistic and I'm proud of
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've come so far with that. And I feel the sense of community. I don't know if you follow many, Instagram pages related to autism, where I know that we obviously you've seen my mental health page, but I don't cover autism because it's not my
Mhm.
place to talk about, seeing as I don't have it. But do you follow many accounts of people that would inspire you to be comfortable in yourself?
Yeah, and I love it because everyone's so different with autism. Obviously, it's a
Hmm.
spectrum, and I love that these accounts are there because they're all so different. And I love
Yeah.
people being open, saying these are the characteristics I have, these are the ones I don't. Because I
Hmm.
think sometimes it's hard to kind of feel like you fit into the category because
Yeah.
you only have a few characteristics. You don't have the whole all of the traits of the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
So it is sometimes it just feels a little bit invalidating, like, am I? When
Hmm.
I say invalidating, more self-invalidating.
Yeah.
Um, saying like, oh well, I don't do this and they do that, so I don't have autism. Kind of, but that stems from the judgment I've always received from other people of,
Yeah.
oh, but my little brother is nonverbal, so you don't have autism because you can speak.
Yeah.
But I love that people are getting out there on social media and saying these things without like fear of being compared.
Yeah, 100%. I feel the sense of community, even that we have with the internet nowadays, and with companies like Spun Out that you're working for, and ADHD Ireland that I volunteer with. It's really validating to see all the different people who have neurodiversity in common and all the different traits. And no two of us are the same, but really we do have a lot in common. And stigma is a huge thing that we would have experienced growing up. I feel like that would be quite common between ADHD and autism.
Yeah, I love that the internet is obviously it always was, but I mean when we were younger, there wasn't really Instagram and influencers and things like
Hmm.
that. But I love that now ADHD Ireland is out there and Spun Out is
Hmm.
out there and all these personal accounts are out there.
Yeah.
So when girls who were diagnosed when I was diagnosed 15, they have access to information that I didn't have. And hopefully
Yes.
that's a big step forward in,
Yeah.
just being yourself.
Do you feel that um, if you had had the exposure to these sort of accounts and mental health organizations from a younger age, do you feel you would have accepted the diagnosis quicker than you did when you were younger, with the lack of resources that you may have had at the time?
Oh yeah, most likely, because
Hmm.
it was very much so just stigmatized at the time
Yeah.
as, Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory,
Yeah.
stereotypical, obsessed with trains, doesn't understand sarcasm, things like that. So everyone just kind of assumes everyone's like that. But if we
Hmm.
had these resources back then, it would have explained more that no, you can be neurodiverse and be completely different to the
Yeah.
next person. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Entirely.
yeah, it would be a lot easier to accept the diagnosis because you'd be able to see the different characteristics and relate to which ones you actually have and think, oh, that
Hmm.
actually makes sense, instead of hearing about all the ones that you don't have because people see it on TV or people's little
Mm.
cousins have it or whatever.
Yeah. Do you feel that um, maybe your autism is less supported than maybe people who would say, like you said, oh, my little cousin has that, and maybe in kids or people who are nonverbal, do you feel it would be more supported than the way that you come across to people?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because I come across as not looking autistic, then people kind of don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
And like I said, when I was diagnosed at 15, so I had no help from
Yeah.
school. I had no SNA, I had nothing like that.
Mhm.
I had no access to that. So that makes a big difference in terms of how seriously people take it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
she is an SNA, so she needs help, or, well,
This is
she
the
doesn't,
thing.
she's
Yeah.
fine in school, so she's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, completely. I feel that that must have been so like off-putting for you to accept the diagnosis, because you're like, okay, well, maybe I would have gotten the help if I was that, in that way inclined to need the help. And now that I'm older, am I willing to accept this diagnosis? Like, is it me? And you didn't have the support at the time or the resources to know.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like,
and
especially since I didn't understand it at the time. So
mm,
going back to school and explaining it to friends and teachers and them not giving the validation, them not
yeah,
understanding, didn't help at all. Because I'm
yeah,
thinking I
entirely.
don't look like I have autism, and they're saying you don't look like you have autism. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That leads me on to say, because I wanted to talk a bit about how we met, but I also wanted to validate something for you. Is, if you remember, we love going out, and of course
Yeah.
you remember this. When I was out with you and my partner at the time, and I said to you, but you don't seem like you have autism. And that must have been a very invalidating statement, and I was very uneducated on the spectrum of autism, and I must have really offended you. But do you think that that's the kind of way that people would approach you about it? Do you get that a lot?
It's completely different. It all depends on the attitude.
Mm,
So if someone says to me, oh, you don't look autistic because this, and that's what they choose to believe and move on and judge me, it's
yeah.
different to, like, I've always said, ignorance isn't a bad thing. Ignorance is kind of put out there to be, you're ignorant, that means you don't know any better,
Yeah.
which is true, but it doesn't mean that in a bad way. It just
Mhm.
means that you're not educated enough. So if someone said to me, oh, you don't look like you have autism, they're not meaning it like that. They're trying their best. Sometimes people think it's a compliment,
Yeah.
like, oh, but you look so normal, which it isn't. And or people say, oh, sure, we're all on the spectrum, which is very that bothers me a lot. But the majority of the time, people are just trying to relate with you
Yeah.
and like reassure you, like, no, you're not weird, even though you're not telling them you're weird. Their
Hmm.
idea is just that you're telling them, like, I have this thing that makes me weird, and they're like, no,
Exactly.
you don't.
Yeah, exactly. I do understand the relatability and people trying to empathize with you or maybe make you feel better, which
Mhm.
isn't needed. But I hear what you're saying, that maybe the main thing that you're looking for is people who are willing to understand, like people who are
Exactly.
willing to learn about you and not to just paint you with the same brush that they've experienced in the past.
Yeah, because I have no problem with people not understanding, but it's once I
Hmm.
say to them, oh, actually, it's this, and then they're open to listening.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a big difference, like, in the attitude of whether it's, but you don't look autistic, or, oh, you don't look autistic.
I know what you mean. It's people's willingness to actually learn about it and people's willingness to negate their ignorance about it. That's the most important thing. It's
Which is
nice that you
actually,
don't.
it's actually really funny because a lot of people with autism struggle with understanding tones of voice. So that's a
Yeah.
bit complicated when I'm saying, oh, well, if you say it like this, it's not bad. If you say it like this, it's bad. And I'd be
Mm,
one of those people who don't understand tones of voice, but because this is something I've kind of experienced over and over
yeah.
again, I'm getting used to it. It just seems ironic the way I'm saying, you go by the tone of voice, even though a lot of autistic people struggle with that.
Yeah, no, completely. But I feel like we were discussing this the other day when we were meant to do
Mhm.
the podcast, that
Yeah.
it can be a learning curve with social cues for autistic people, can't it? But not
Hmm.
always. But like you're saying, maybe a repeated experience can like ingrain it in your head. Okay, this is the way that people are saying this, and this is the way that I prefer the tone of voice for people to say.
Yeah, and with social aspects, I I was only reading the other day, I never really thought about it, how that affects people with ADHD. I
Yeah.
mean, we both have difficulties with social interaction, but in
Mhm.
completely different ways.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your experience with difficulties with social interactions.
It's funny because I would totally get the minor like social things, like always, but I would take that as a bad thing a lot of the time because it would just, I feel so empathetic towards other people's emotions and other people's minor interactions, like that I would take things very personally if
Hmm.
someone gave me a look a certain way, if someone talked to me in a different tone of voice than usual, or maybe someone's less talkative, and I would pick up on all of that so easily.
Yeah.
I know you do too because of our discussion the other day,
Hmm.
when you were a bit worried by the way I was texting, which is completely valid, and I feel that we validate each other in that way, and that's why our friendship works really well.
Yeah, exactly. Not a
um
lot of people have friendships that open.
yeah,
And it's especially because we both have our own things going on. That's why we understand.
yeah, we definitely do. And that may be a common thing with autism and ADHD, or it may just be a common thing with us, that we pick up on the minor micro interactions, I think they're called, and we maybe ruminate over that and we worry. But that for ADHD, that's a huge thing in RSD, so rejection sensitive
Mhm.
dysphoria. That maybe minor interactions like that, I'd go home from college, maybe I said something slightly wrong, and it would be weeks of ruminating over it at night until I would feel very comfortable that the interaction was okay. And sometimes I don't even get over it. Like I'd
Yeah.
remember maybe interactions from 7 years ago that were like someone else would have forgotten them. And I know it doesn't cross their mind at all,
Mhm.
but I'm like, oh, I did that. And it was so embarrassing.
But
Um,
that's why I love being here for you, because I totally accept that. Like if you say something about what you said a month ago and you say this has been bothering me, I'll be like, I understand. I won't push it away. Like, oh, that's grand. It's
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
take the time to listen to you because you need to say it and you need to get it out there and you need to kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like close the door on that.
Yeah, that's actually that's a very, very good analogy, I guess, if that's the right word. Because it is just something that can take time. But I feel like, I don't know if this really draws into it or if it's just the kind of people we are. Because I know we were discussing when we saw each other a few days ago, we're both really empathetic people, which can be a downfall and also a good thing.
Yeah.
But to be honest, like I do see mine as more of a downfall than a good thing, um, most of the time.
Hmm.
But we may just be empathetic in nature, but we did meet in a mental health facility. So
Yes.
do you feel that
So we had
you're,
that in common from the beginning.
yes, and do you feel that like your maybe past struggles and experiences, whether or not related to autism, maybe just neurodiversity in general, do you feel that they shaped you to be that kind of empathetic person who really strives to look after people, maybe like me, in friendships, and really tries to understand other people? Because you definitely do. You're always there for me, and I don't think I could say anything wrong to you realistically.
Uh-huh. What was I gonna say? Can you cut out that? What was I gonna say?
Yeah,
um,
you don't have to ask; they'll be cut out.
okay. What did you ask? I'm so sorry. Oh, does it
I
shape who I
said,
am?
do you think meeting in a mental health facility, or maybe even just mental health struggles in general, apart from the relatability that we have to each other, do you feel like it shaped you to be a more empathetic, more understanding person in general? Because I feel like it
Yeah.
did.
I was actually thinking about this earlier, and a random thought came to mind. Like, I doubt anyone has ever thought something like this. But you know the term, like, put yourself in their shoes?
Yeah.
I kind of put myself, no, I kind of put themselves in my shoes. And I think,
Okay.
how would I react to something and how would I like someone
Mm-hmm.
to respond?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes that would be me being over caring because I'm a lot more sensitive and might need more reassurance than others.
Mm-hmm.
But I always think, if I was in this situation and I felt this way and I was overthinking it, what would I like someone to say to reassure me?
Yeah. Yeah. Entirely. And that's definitely stems from empathy, but it's a really
Yeah.
good way to view it because it definitely forms relatability with all the people you're going to meet. It makes you as amazing as you are to be able to do things with spun out, and it makes you a really good friend. And do you feel that maybe these kind of experiences, the adverse experiences in your life, have anything to do with neurodiversity? Like, you know, the way people always say with maybe ADHD and autism, there's a lot of coexisting disorders, there's a lot of coexisting mental health issues, and a lot of them are misdiagnosed. But for the ones that you are comfortable sharing, do you feel that they either stem from or are heavily related to your neurodiversity?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, like I said earlier, I'm kind of only getting to know myself more and more and more, and I'm kind of making more connections in my head because I am doing an SNA course and I am working with kids on the spectrum, so I'm seeing a lot of myself in them, and that's kind of been helping me think, oh wait, I do that, like oh,
Yeah.
so I do have OCD and I never
Mhm.
linked them before. And the other day, someone asked me if you had been diagnosed earlier, do you think that would have affected your mental health? And I said no at
Yeah.
first. And then I thought about it and thought, well, the thing with autism, you know, it's a big trait, repetitive behaviors.
Mhm.
Um, I needed a laptop for my leaving cert. I
Mhm.
got it because of my diagnosis of
Okay.
autism, but I've always struggled with OCD in terms of writing things. So I would write
Yes.
the same notes and then rip them out and do it over and over again. Like the
Mhm.
amount of times, you know, the way with the school journals, like €10. My parents had to buy it about 5 times,
Yeah.
just based on the where I wrote my name on the cover.
Oh
So
gosh, that's tough.
I I've always kind of just thought, oh, that's the OCD, but it does relate to um, autism and
Mhm.
traits like that, repetitive behaviors that do coincide.
Yeah.
So that is really interesting because I'm wondering if I was diagnosed in primary school, maybe I wouldn't have I wouldn't have had the opportunity to get so caught up on those little things.
Yeah, yeah. You're saying autism and repetitive behaviors, and OCD. I know that an article I read last night, it's actually really funny we're talking about this, is I had OCD when I was younger, very severe, but now it's actually after coming back quite badly. But I didn't know about the various types of
Hmm.
OCD, and when I was reading an article about them last night, because I've began getting like repetitive behaviors,
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts, needing to like strict order in things. And you know, maybe if there's like dishes in the sink, my whole day is thrown off and I'm
Hmm.
crying over it. I actually learned that it's quite linked to ADHD. So it may be heavily linked to autism. I don't know because the only one I read was about ADHD. But it
Hmm.
might be interesting for you to have a read about whether it links into autism, because not that they're the same thing, but neurodiversity as a whole, surely it would relate to that. And maybe you wouldn't have gotten to that point had you had the support earlier.
Yeah,
Um,
like when I was studying my module on autism and ADHD, associated conditions were OCD, you know, depression, anxiety, mental health conditions.
mhm,
But speaking of stigma, like we were earlier, OCD is another big one.
huge.
And like you said, you didn't know there were different kinds of OCD, and now
Yeah.
you have that information, you kind of understand.
Sadly,
Yeah,
purely based off my own experiences, I had to
yeah,
learn, which is
yeah.
awful because we're not taught these things that we should be taught in school.
Mm.
Instead of bloody, I don't know, having to do PE, which I hated, we should as well have talk about mental health issues, talk about general things like this, because I only had to learn about these types of OCD based on the fact that I'm experiencing these symptoms again. Um, and you know, I was diagnosed very young with it, when I was like 11 in therapy, and then it was never spoken about again.
Yeah,
So I understand the
because other things
frustration.
come up and take over.
Yeah, that's the thing as well. Like, I don't know about you, your experiences with mental health conditions related to autism or not, but I was misdiagnosed with around 4 different mental health disorders before
Mhm.
they actually realized it was
Wow,
ADHD. Um,
that's a
and
lot.
Yeah, so the general one that I would still experience is seasonal depression, but
Hmm.
I was diagnosed with more generalized depression and severe depressive episodes, which turned out that it was just ADHD,
Hmm.
because I was getting depressed about my routine and all these things. And then generalized anxiety disorder was one I was also diagnosed with. I've been undiagnosed since. BPD was another one. And then OCD has come back, so I would say that's probably still there. But in general, there was a lot. I was also on they half diagnosed me with
Is that
autism when I was
possible?
younger. They tried to diagnose me with autism, and at the time I was so stigmatizing ADHD and autism that I refused both diagnoses.
Yeah.
Well, actually my parents kind of refused it, not me,
Hmm.
which was a bit invalidating, but
Yeah.
they did say no, we think it's ADHD, not autism. So there was kind of those four that came up before they even considered ADHD. It was more, I was nearly 18 by the time that they considered it, and then even said that was a no. And then I got obviously re-diagnosed at 20.
Hmm.
So that was, yeah. I feel
Yeah.
like I wouldn't have had all these experiences with all these different medications, all this admittance to maybe hospital or the children's psychiatrists and stuff,
I
if
know, it's
they
such a
had just
shame.
picked up. It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
In my thesis, I was writing about ADHD, and one of the ladies who's got ADHD and she writes for a blog, she calls it the lost years. And
Hmm.
although it's kind of a sad take, it kind of is the lost years, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
either we were misdiagnosed or we were neglected to actually, I don't know if you agree, but especially as women, we were
Oh yeah,
neglected
definitely as
to,
women.
yeah, so that's actually my thesis. But we were neglected as women to even consider ADHD and autism
Hmm.
for a long time.
But even now, how we were talking about, like I was saying, it's a shame that that was your experience. But look at you now, hosting an ADHD Ireland podcast. Like, I always think it's good to see the brighter sides in these things. Obviously,
Yeah.
all that was not so nice, but
Mhm.
that means today you have so much experience that you can share with other people,
Yeah.
and you're such a great help to people
Aw,
who are like you, and even myself,
you're
even
so
though
sweet.
I don't have ADHD, you know a lot, you understand a lot about me,
Yeah.
and like you're just more open to understanding a lot than
Yeah.
most people are.
It's a blessing and a curse, but
Hmm.
definitely a blessing a lot of the time. I mean, I don't think I would have gotten where I am now in general, mental health wise, had I not have gotten my diagnosis and had I not have gone through a lot of the things I went through. But,
Hmm.
it is hard sometimes. Like obviously ADHD is just difficult a lot of the time.
Hmm.
Like routine, organization, social interactions, um, you know, prevalence of depression and anxiety, that sort of thing, which we talked about in a lot of the other podcast episodes. So I won't
Yeah.
stick on that. But it is nice that I am here now and I am doing this. And I'm very lucky to be here
Hmm.
doing this because even diagnosis is a privilege, and in
Yeah.
Ireland, especially. And that's really hard to think about. Um, you know, us in ADHD Ireland, we're so open to people joining that don't have a diagnosis yet, or maybe are unable to
Hmm.
get a diagnosis because it is expensive and really, really hard to obtain. But
As
I am
well,
in a place of privilege.
I think sometimes people, it's like when doctors are assessing them, they're only thinking of categories and putting them into a box.
Yes.
So, say there's, like, I'm completely making this up, say there's 10 things that um, you have to tick off to be diagnosed with ADHD, and
You're
someone
really
only has
close.
nine.
It's 9. You're so
Oh,
close.
really? Um,
Yeah.
and someone only has nine, so they don't get a diagnosis, and then they won't get
Mhm.
help. They won't get the
Yes.
support they need for those
Mhm.
issues because they don't fit into that box.
It's really hard to think about. Even like I've talked about how I was diagnosed on a whim, because obviously where we met, as long as you're comfortable with me talking about
Yeah, of
it,
course.
we met because we were both in an eating disorder group, as to
Hmm.
say, like a group kind of recovery session, in hospital as outpatients, and we were even lucky to be there. But
Mhm.
because again, it's a place of privilege, I do have to say, because we're
Yeah,
lucky enough to either have families who support us to help pay for that, or maybe health insurance or whatever we needed.
so lucky. Like, we
So
don't
lucky.
appreciate it enough, because without that, we, God, like, we'd be
Yeah, I
so
don't even want to think
vulnerable.
about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Like obviously it's good to talk about it. I'm only joking saying I don't want to think about it, but it's hard to think about not being in able to like avail of those services.
Mhm.
And it was only through that, like again, another coexisting disorder, that I got my ADHD diagnosis on a whim. So
Mhm.
I would have had to go through so much payment, so much stress to get something that I didn't
Yeah.
even know about. I didn't even know what ADHD was. So, and then she just diagnosed me on a whim because she noticed it in me. And then I was on this
Mhm.
medication for it, didn't even know what the medication was, which again is a communication issue. They should have really told
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, I feel like that happens a lot, but I suppose that's
Yes.
another conversation for another day
Well, that's
about
another
yeah.
neurodiverse thing though, isn't it?
Mhm.
They don't think it's a necessity to tell us something that could change our whole lives to know.
Yeah, and we
Because
just go along with it. I just go,
yeah,
you're the doctor, you know what's best. So
exactly. And like you were saying about, you know, where I am today and where you are too, like we found this community and we found people who understand us. But if we hadn't been told these things by the people who are meant to be the professionals,
yeah.
maybe we wouldn't have found, you know, the likes of ADHD Ireland, the likes of the podcast and Spun Out and all these facilities that are so
Mhm.
important to us. So it's hard to think about really, because I didn't know anything about it when I got the diagnosis, you know.
It's interesting that autism was my first diagnosis and ADHD was one of your most recent.
Really, I didn't know it was your first
Yeah,
diagnosis.
that's why I was confused at the time, because I was expecting to be diagnosed with depression or anxiety, because that's
Wow.
kind of all I knew at the time, you know, when you're that
Hmm.
age, and that
Yeah,
when we had so little information compared to today, it was just,
yeah,
oh, I feel like this must be depression or anxiety. So
yeah,
when it was something completely different, that's why it was so hard to accept and understand, because my
yeah,
head was still on the, but no, I'm depressed.
yeah,
But they were kind of looking at the bigger picture, I suppose.
yeah.
But again, that's why it's good to have that diagnosis, because you know why
Hmm.
you were feeling that way, which I didn't. I didn't at the time. Even with the diagnosis, I didn't get it. And it's only now that I am getting it. Um,
Yeah.
but it's even. I'm only just thinking about it now. Um, so when I was diagnosed, I was originally diagnosed with autism and then OCD. So
Mm.
years later, it wasn't before until I saw a psychiatrist, like in an adult services, that I was diagnosed with BPD. And
Oh.
then I was diagnosed there a few years later, then with an eating disorder. But it's
Mm.
interesting because my GP, if they were talking about my mental health, they'd say autism and OCD, but my psychiatrist would say BPD and an eating disorder. And
Yeah.
I feel like even my psychiatrist doesn't really believe that I have autism, because I think he
God.
thinks, oh, well, that's what they thought it was, but it's all the other things, because that's what I felt like.
It's kind of
Um,
scary.
yeah, so I don't even mention it when I'm talking to my psychiatrist. Don't mention autism whatsoever, because I'm afraid he'll be like, "What?"
Yeah, yeah, I get you. And that's so difficult for you. But, you know, if we didn't have both stigmatization and also just more education on these things, I'm a big fan of, you know, not self diagnosis as a whole, but being okay with admitting,
Mhm.
okay, I see a lot of myself in this, you know, whether you keep it to yourself or not, like, you can diagnose all you want as long as you find your community and people who relate to you, because there is such a difficulty with diagnosis. And
Mhm.
also, like you're saying, psychiatrists who may be different than one another disagreeing on what diagnosis you have. So that's why I'm saying it's both a place of privilege, and also it can be quite a scary place to even seek diagnosis, because you go to one person, like you're saying, you get one diagnosis, you
Mhm.
go to another and you don't even want to mention it.
Yeah,
So the sense
exactly.
of, that's why I'm lucky with ADHD Ireland and everyone who gets the support from them, because
Mhm.
there's no need to have a formal diagnosis. It's, if you relate to this, you can be here. And that's
But
lovely.
in terms of being diagnosed young, I think a diagnosis is so important.
Yes.
I mean, at our age, we've been through it all. But if you can diagnose a child 3 or 4 with ADHD or autism, you are helping them get through their school life.
Exactly.
Because
It's very important.
if you didn't have that diagnosis, they won't get their SNA, they won't get their like assistive technology, they won't get whatever resources they're entitled to. And that's why I think a diagnosis is so important, not because it's a label. It's nothing to do with that. It's useful.
It's opportunities and extra help that you may need.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because during my work experience as an SNA, I have come across parents who won't get their kids assessed because they don't want to label their kids. And that's not helping their kids at all, or themselves, or anyone.
I think that's making it harder for them. And I think, fair enough, like it's every parent's choice, but my God, I wish that my parents picked up on the things that were noticeable in me from such a young age. All of my reports from school would say exactly the symptoms of ADHD. And my dad especially was very uneducated about mental health difficulties, not necessarily in a bad way, just to use your term ignorant earlier. And kind of didn't want to know either. So I didn't get the help I needed. And I know that he regrets that now. And, he does accept my diagnosis. But my God, like these things were noticed in my school reports by my parents and they didn't do anything about it. And it would have been extra help to me. And the help I receive now, it doesn't really matter whether a parent wants to label their child or not. What's important is that you're labeling an opportunity for help. It's not so much that you're labeling something that controls their life, that categorizes them. It's it's the opportunity to get extra help when it's needed, and that's the most important thing, not society's stigma of labels.
And I'm not sure if that might be something to do with how, like you said earlier about women, it's not recognized in women, but also things like ADHD and autism weren't as much recognized as physical disabilities.
Yes.
Like I remember we had a girl in our class in primary school, and I'm not sure what physical disability she had, but she needed an SNA. So there was an SNA in my class. Yet no one kind of picked up on anything that were obvious signs.
I know, and that can be frustrating, can't it?
Yeah, because I didn't know at the time, but like now, obvious signs. Like I said, the handwriting thing, things having to be perfect.
Yeah.
And even I didn't eat lunch all through primary, secondary school because lunch boxes freak me out. Cling film, food, textures, smells, just the idea of it. And the SNA, funny enough, had to watch me at lunch. Like she had this thing with my parents where she said, I'll watch her, I'll make sure she eats her lunch. Yeah, there wasn't really anything thought about that, even though the SNA was kind of helping me with that.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, she probably knew, but it probably wasn't her place to say.
Well, in fairness, she wasn't helping me because I just refused.
Well,
like,
that again
that's
is
on
an
me.
indicator, isn't it? You're just like, oh God, I can't deal with the lunchbox or the cling film, but I don't want your help though.
Yeah. But no one noticed that. Like no one noticed, oh well, that's a bit like not odd. Well, yeah, odd. Like that's the only word, I suppose. Should we look into it,
Yeah. I know, I get that. The sensory stuff is so coexisting between autism and ADHD. And also
I think that's probably
like,
the biggest similarity.
It is.
In my
it
opinion.
Definitely is. Sensory overload, definitely the biggest similarity. And also, things that are coexisting like dyspraxia, dyslexia, dyscalculia. So it can also be not just mental but physical too.
Yeah.
And that's
definitely
something that should have been noticed.
Yeah.
I was extremely clumsy. And I only found out I had dyspraxia last year. 2 years after my ADHD diagnosis. Yeah, so it's a tough one. I don't know if you experience any of the physical things apart from the sensory overload. If you do, I'd love to hear about it.
Oh, well, I've no coordination at all.
Really?
No, none whatsoever. And I've always been called clumsy, but I trip over nothing. I have the worst coordination, and I remember, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier when I said there were other things going on. So I remember
Yeah.
when I was seeing an occupational therapist, and they said to me, "Oh, actually, you might have dyspraxia, but there's so much going on right now. We'll come back to that later."
That
And then
is
they never did.
insulting and
Um,
neglectful.
yeah, but that's happened a few times with a few things. Like
Yeah.
I know this is a bit off topic from
No, go on.
neurodiversity, but I had my diagnosis of an eating disorder. I don't know, when I was about 20, 21,
Hmm.
22. And when I was really struggling with it, I was 16, 17.
Yeah.
And I was severely underweight and severely under eating. And
Hmm.
what they said to me was, "Oh, sorry, we didn't notice. It's just your other diagnoses at the time were kind of more important."
Yeah, which is just showing the lack of understanding sometimes. And I know, without talking too much for you, that you basically had to scream out yourself about your eating disorder.
Yeah, I
Your
did.
psychiatrist did not really pick up on it and also didn't really believe you, because
Mhm,
I feel the way that they handled it, which I won't say for you, was awful. And also, when you came into group, you were saying, I don't know if I should be here. I don't think
mhm,
that I should be here. I don't really know if I'm actually valid enough to be here. And, I remember one of the things that we got along with was just
mhm,
me being like, you are valid to be here. You're
mhm.
struggling. You should be here. Not anything about, what I knew about your eating
Mhm.
disorder, just purely from a mental standpoint. I
Yeah,
was like, you so need to be here because the way you're talking about it.
you had my
And
back from the beginning.
I had your back, and more so than your bloody
Yeah,
psychiatrist. That's what I
exactly.
mean. Like, I knew nothing about you. I knew
Yeah.
nothing about the way that were your
Mhm.
relationship with food or your relationship with your body image. Nothing
Yeah.
didn't
You
matter to
saw
me.
I was
What mattered
struggling and you
was
took it seriously,
I took
basically.
you seriously. And I feel like that's why our friendship works.
Mhm.
Um, that the dynamic between us, regardless of whether we knew about you being autistic and me having ADHD, because I don't think
Mhm.
I knew till after that.
Yeah, we didn't even know. Like when we first met, like
Yeah.
I knew I had autism, but we didn't know about each other, about neurodiversity, like that we had that in common. We didn't
No.
know that at all. We just kind of clicked
But
because I think we're just
yeah.
very similar people.
Yeah, and it shows that, like, I don't know, well, it mightn't show, but it may devolve that people who are neurodiverse have a lot in common without even saying to each other, "Oh, I'm neurodiverse."
Yeah.
Like, we picked up on our similarities straight away.
Definitely.
And it's cute. It's nice. It's nice to think back
Yeah.
because we were so supportive of each other back then as
hmm
well. And the most important thing is having a sense of understanding of other people. Um, you're such an understanding person as well. And also, I feel like because of ADHD and autism, we
hmm
might be super blunt about certain things. So I remember
hmm
that I came in with a raging hangover because I was 20
Yeah, I
and I
remember
liked to
that.
drink back then. And
You
you were
were
like,
wearing your boyfriend at the time, his tracksuit bottoms, and then you were wearing heels.
from my night out the night before, which is not a good look, guys. And I used to
It was
have,
a lovely look. If
it was
anyone can pull it
awful.
off, Lauren can.
That I could back then. But the thing is, another thing I want to mention is I had a huge drinking problem back then. And
Mhm.
I do put a lot of that down to being neurodiverse because sensory seeking,
Yeah.
addictive personality from the ADHD, all of that stuff. And now I'm managing it, which is great. But just to touch on that,
Mhm.
I don't know if it's similar with being autistic. But back then, I remember our bluntness and relatability. We were just like, I drink. And then you were like, I drink. And I was like, we drink.
Let's
And you were
drink.
like, we drink. So it was more so that we found something in common straight away. And we were also
Yeah.
very upfront about the fact that we love nights out. And we were like, okay, we have something in common. Let's be friends.
And I think that
And,
helped me because I struggle with socializing and friendships, the whole, obviously, I'm not promoting drinking, but I mean, that connection we had, let's go get a drink started the friendship easily for me because I would
yeah,
have been, if I would have been anxious if it was like, let's go for coffee. Because I'd be like, what'll I talk about?
yeah,
It wasn't even like, let's go out and get mad. It was just, let's go for a drink. And I was like, yeah, cool. I like going for drinks.
yeah,
And
yeah. We had something in
yeah.
common straight away. We like nights out. That's the main important thing. We liked being out, and we liked, that social buzz and that kind of not so much pressure to sit across from each other
Yeah,
directly and just talk.
exactly. Which
And
now
you
we can
were,
do perfectly.
yeah.
It's but it took a lot, like it took
Yeah, it took a while.
yeah, and
Definitely.
it takes that to build a real friendship, a great friendship.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people who I still wouldn't be able to be as comfortable around as I'm most comfortable around you as I am with anyone.
Oh, that's so sweet. I know that, like, based on that, a lot of it was our similarities, in that way that we just clicked straight away. And I think that is a neurodiverse thing as well. It's like we automatically have something in common. Oh, we're best friends. And that was
Yeah,
just it,
it
which is
makes
cute.
sense.
It's
Like this
sweet.
equals this.
Yeah, exactly. It's like very literal. It's very simple. It's
hmm
just like, we're friends now. Okay, good. And I wanted to know, based on the questions that you read earlier from my preparations, if you see anything of yourself in me related to neurodiversity.
Yeah, it's kind of you. It's only something I've really thought about recently
Hmm.
because the way I said neurodiversity, that's a new term for me. So it's only kind of recently I've thought about that um, connection so much, like how
Yeah.
it impacts our friendship.
Hmm.
Um, and it's it kind of seems like there's more differences than similarities,
Yeah.
but the differences aren't like problematic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I think that's how it works. Like there probably are similarities. Like, do you have any? I can't think of any, but there's probably a lot.
Well, I guess it was more of a silly question because we've talked about similarities but experiencing things in different ways.
Oh
So,
yeah, and like empathy, we're both
yes.
understanding people. Like we both have
Hmm.
those. We both have the same qualities, like and the same moral. What's the word?
Compass.
Yeah, like yeah.
Yeah, no, we do. We have the same morals. We have a lot of the same beliefs.
Yeah.
We are probably on the liberal side of politics, most definitely. And I feel that anyone who's empathetic is. But anyway, we'll cut that bit out. Yeah, definitely empathetic. But with you, I feel it's more you pick up on the little things straight away. And you might worry and text
Mhm.
me. Like we've had conversations like that. What I would do is not realize for about a week that I said or did something wrong, and
Yeah.
then it hits me at 12 a.m. and I start panic texting.
So that's one
Um,
of those things that's a similarity, but in a
yeah,
completely different way.
yeah, exactly.
Which is interesting. Um,
Also, we love hard. We love our friends hard. We love our
mhm.
families hard. We may put a lot of ourselves into relationships.
Too much
Um,
sometimes.
yeah, definitely too much. But I wasn't going to put it that bluntly. But there you go.
I
Um,
put everything bluntly.
yeah, no, I'm very proud of you for that. It's important. Yeah, so empathy, lots of love, being ourselves even when it's hard to do so.
hmm
We're very much ourselves and we cannot hide it even if we try.
Yeah, no,
um
that's why I love our friendship because I can be comfortable around you. I've noticed recently, like I am the queen of masking, and I've never really thought
yeah.
about it before. But when I notice things that I do
Hmm.
out in public, out in society, with other people, I've
Yeah.
noticed I'm a completely different person
Yeah.
with the people I'm comfortable with. In
Yeah.
not in- just not it's not the same. I'm not a different person like in a personality trait wise and like I'm nicer there and I'm not nice here or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nothing like that. It's just the way I kind of feel comfortable expressing myself.
Yeah, entirely. And I actually think that's another similarity there, because masking is very prevalent in ADHD as well. And it's a
Yeah.
tough one because I feel awful for you that you have to do it as well. Um that's, society's unwritten rules and fitting in, which is definitely something that people who are autistic and people with ADHD have found their whole lives. I know that for a fact that we have trouble fitting in
Yeah,
to
like
society's rules.
I think that's interesting. Like it'll be interesting. Do you have any examples of masking in terms of ADHD?
Yeah. So a lot of the time I'll catch myself doing what I think is talking too excitedly about something. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll basically, people who know me very well would pick up on it, like you, or maybe, I don't know, some of my other friends would pick up that I would just shut down
Yeah.
and basically disassociate, zone out, because I realized that I was being too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then other than that, stimming would be a big thing for me. When
Yeah,
I'm on
which
my
you
own.
mentioned recently, you only kind of
Yeah,
noticed.
I vocally stim all the time. And the only person that I was comfortable doing it in front of previously was Michael. And, you know, it was that I was comfortable with him, that it just happened. It wasn't that
Yeah.
I mentally chose to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just the more comfortable you are with someone, it happens. But, you know, I would just repeat a phrase over and over again. And sometimes I even do it when I'm on my own with like one song lyric or one quote, or maybe just, I don't know, getting the dogs excited is something I do all the time.
Yeah.
And I should leave them alone when they're just sitting there doing nothing, but I just keep
It's
calling them
hard though,
crazy
they're so
girls.
cute.
They're so cute. And
So they're
then,
probably
yeah,
so overwhelmed when I'm there too, because we're both like, oh my God, I love you.
yeah, I know it. It's so great. You're the only person who loves my dogs as much as me, and that's what I like about you.
Maybe even
That's the
more.
only thing I like about you. Yeah, no, that's
Oh,
true. I'm
well,
only
that's the only thing I
joking.
like about you too, is your dog. So I guess we have that in common anyway.
That's another thing about masking, Becca.
Mhm.
Just by the way you're talking to me, I try not to be humorous about bad things in front of
Mhm.
anyone else. And sometimes I'll accidentally do it. And I like vocally speak things out loud, like
Mhm.
almost like I have tics a lot of the time, and then also some kind of vocal tics, or maybe they're more vocal stims, but I'd say something straight, like blurt something out, and I didn't even register I was going to say it.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I find with you that I don't have to mask is
Yeah.
we both make jokes a lot of the time about things that other people would be shocked that we make jokes about, and it's our way of coping, isn't it?
Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest things we have in common, which is great because it's our humor as well, do you know, because we can say these things and then laugh about them when you can't really do that with other people that don't
No.
have the same kind of point of view. Like, I
Yeah.
have a very blunt, dark sense of humor, and you understand that.
Yeah.
Like there's things and if I said them, I'd have to be like, oh no, 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 and kind of explain it, but I don't have to
Yeah.
explain it with you.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's sweet. It's sweet because like that's just a like subconscious understanding that we have of each other. And it's kind of like we know that if we accidentally push the boundaries that the other person would understand.
Yeah, and I know, like, if you make a joke, and say we joke about something really insensitive, it's not that we're insensitive people. we're it's just I forget what I was going to say, so we can ignore that bit.
No, it's grand. I was gonna say, yeah, like we definitely joke a lot about our trauma with mental health issues.
Yeah,
And that's just a coping way, and that's like valid, but it's just something that it's
yeah,
a part of myself I wouldn't show other people, like.
it's like we have the understanding of each other that we're not being insensitive, but we don't have to explain that because we know.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. I feel like we have like an underlying like mental language that we just kind of like
yeah,
know that the other person's joking, even
yeah, we
without like
do.
even without saying it, even without being like, I'm only joking afterwards. But like
Yeah,
a lot of the time I'd over explain myself to other people because I'd be scared.
yeah,
And
that
you
it
do the
was.
same thing.
Yeah.
I know you do the same
Oh yeah, definitely.
thing. Because it's just, it's one of those things where you don't feel like you are doing the right thing
Yeah.
socially a lot of the time. Not you,
Mhm.
you plural.
Mhm.
Um, being neurodiverse, you're like, am I doing the right thing socially? Am I talking the right way right now? Am
Yeah,
I
because there's
expressing
such a
myself right?
pressure on wanting to fit in and wanting to be normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is,
Neurodiverse, or
yeah.
not neurodiverse, neurotypical.
Neurotypical, that's the word.
Yeah, and that's difficult. I'd love to be, but also I wouldn't, because like we've talked about so many nice things.
Yeah, exactly.
Our friendship
Um,
and like relationships in our lives wouldn't be as deep if it wasn't
Definitely
for
not.
being neurodiverse.
And I mean, it's hard because I put so much into things, and because I overthink things, like if you don't do a smiley face or something in one like message,
Yeah.
and I might overthink that. But other than that, I do think it's good that I put myself like completely all in.
Yeah, 100%. And like, it's completely fine if you ever say to me, your tone or your tone of texting even is different. And you're like, what's wrong? Like, that'll never scare me off because I understand. Like,
Oh yeah, because I'd be terrified to say that to anyone else. They'd be like, "You're crazy." Oh, sorry, you said I
yeah,
can't say
no,
crazy,
you
didn't you?
can say crazy when you talk about yourself. I just mean we've had some things we had to cut out before, but no, that's fine. But yeah, no, people would often think of, I don't know, especially neurodiverse people as clingy because we're always thinking micro interactions. We're thinking about them all the time, and we're picking up on
Oh yeah,
people's
every single
tiny
sentence,
things.
every single word, every single facial expression for me,
Yeah,
every single change in tone of voice, that like it exhausts my brain because that's what I spend every second, every minute doing. And when I'm out in
I know.
public, is
Yeah,
overanalyzing other people
yeah,
and
that's yeah.
making things up in my head. Like, this must be because they hate me. Why do they hate me? Does everyone hate me?
And then that drains your social battery and your internal battery.
Yeah.
So that's a tough thing. But it can also be a good thing when it's with people aren't going to leave you, because you're picking up on their every little thing that they like. I'd say we're really good at giving presents. We're picking up on all the little micro things that make them who they are, and we love people for that. But
Yeah.
when it's new people, our social batteries are definitely,
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a big thing. It is. It's new people that's
or people
the
we're not comfortable
hardest.
around.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those are, yeah, they can be really good qualities, but like that is also another similarity, isn't it? The social battery and just the internal battery of people who are neurodiverse in general,
And
it's drained.
with them, in terms of masking, I never like noticed until recently. Like, I've been doing these things, but I didn't know they were masking. And it's only recently I've picked up on a lot. Like I was telling you
Yeah.
the other day, I'd say to someone, "Oh, I'm just running to the toilet," and then I'd be like, "Why did I say running? I'm not running, I'm walking." Like things like that. Or
Yeah.
I'm just a very literal person. Like, if you say
Yeah.
something like, I'm asking because this is something I say all the time. I'm asked because I say, "I'll be back in a second, I'll be 2 minutes." That's me masking. Because if someone says that to me, I'm thinking in my head, "No, you won't. You won't be back in a second. That's literally impossible." But because that's what people say, I'm like, "Oh, that's what people say. So I'll use this phrase, even though it
Right.
doesn't make sense in my brain."
Yeah, exactly. You would rather say, no, you won't be back in a second. You'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm
But
like,
you're
why
just
would
like,
you lie about it? I just don't get it.
I know there's a lot of stifling what we really think.
Yeah.
And you were saying a lot to me about that the other day, and I think it's quite comical, but it is real. Like,
Yeah,
that's
no, it
something you
is
really
funny.
do
Yeah.
experience. But it is funny to think that, like, I don't know, I get those things. So like I would always use euphemisms like that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I guess it's hard to pick up on those things, and you're kind of like, well, I think you were saying to me the other day about raining cats and dogs, that it's not really.
Yeah. I was saying, I was saying like, like, this is just going off me, but people are very, a big stereotype is that, like, they'd say, "Oh, if you tell a child with autism it's raining cats and dogs, they'll look up the sky." No, it's not that. You just, like, you're like, why did you say that? There literally are not cats and dogs in the sky. It's not like we're stupid, like, "Oh, where are
No.
the cats and dogs falling?" Um, it's literally just that. Why would you say that? It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's
Yeah.
not raining cats and dogs, it's just raining rain.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't use a lot of those things either. I guess I'd rather be literal as well. Like, I don't say, like, I don't know, if someone's doing something too much, I don't say, oh, like they're beating the dead horse, or like,
Yeah.
I don't know, I wouldn't say those things. I don't think I've ever said it's raining cats and dogs.
Yeah,
Or
neither
like,
have I, except for when
yeah,
I'm talking about examples like that, because that's an example I've heard so many times in
yeah,
relation to autism.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot of those phrases that I just wouldn't use. It's not like
Hmm.
that for me, it wouldn't be that I don't get the reason for using them, I guess, but I just
Hmm.
would think that they're silly.
Yeah.
So I would rather just like speak the long sentence than, and you know, the way
See,
like,
I go into more thought than, oh, it's silly. I
yeah,
go into like analyzing why the
yeah,
words don't make sense.
yeah, yeah, entirely. Another one that I would not do is, you know, social kind of like social niceties. So you run into someone in the shop and you
Hmm.
know they may not be your friend, you may not be
Hmm.
their friend, and
Yeah.
you know the polite thing to do is go hello, which I will always
Hmm.
do, but then they start with the social niceties and
Yeah.
they're like, oh,
I know
how's your
exactly what
mom?
you're
And
talking about.
I'm like, oh, grand. I'm like, why are you
Yeah,
asking me? You don't like
exactly.
me.
And that's like when you said about like exhaustion, like in social interactions, those little
Yeah.
things even build up
Yeah.
um day by day, like into kind of a,
Burnout.
yeah, that's the word.
Yeah, I know you experience it too from what we have discussed in our private life. And that's such a big similarity as well,
Because those
burnout.
things just affect our brains more than
Yeah.
it would other people. And your
Hmm.
brain, your brain does a lot of work.
Yeah.
And ours is constantly go, go, go.
Yeah. And the
Um,
lack of dopamine we get from the normal things as well.
yeah, yeah,
So that doesn't
exactly.
fuel us either.
Which is another big similarity. So
Yeah.
even you said, what, how are we similar? And I said, I don't know, we're more difficult. We've talked about so many similarities.
Yeah. But there definitely is a lot of differences. But Jesus, we'd
Mhm.
be talking all day if we
Yeah.
covered everything. This is something that
Yeah.
always comes up. People are like, oh, but you know, we'd never talked about that. And I'm like,
Hmm.
honey, we could not talk about everything, or we would
Yeah.
literally be chatting neurodiversity like for like 24
And
hours.
people would get very bored and
Yes,
stop
but well,
listening.
I hope not.
I
But
don't
yeah,
think, no offense, Lauren, but I wouldn't want to listen to you for 24 hours on end about ADHD.
why not? Why wouldn't you want to listen to me for 24 hours? I
Because
think
it's
I'm
so much more
so interesting.
special when it's only for a short amount of time.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's why
And
we
my
try to keep it
concentration
short.
only lasts so long.
Right. Last thing then.
Yeah.
And you're right, concentration is a big thing too.
Yeah.
Um, last thing, I want to know, maybe tell me one or two, or however many you like, things that you love about yourself. Doesn't matter if they're neurodiversity related, but oftentimes they are. But like, what makes you you? What are your favorite qualities about yourself?
That's a hard one because
That's why I'm making you do it.
I'm a very, what's the word?
Critical,
Yeah, about
self-critical.
myself. Yeah, yeah, self-critical. Um,
That's another big similarity.
so
Anyway, go on.
I think I've never really liked anything about myself. I like that I'm understanding and I'm kind, but it's kind of just gotten me in situations where I feel like it doesn't matter, no one appreciates it. This is getting depressing,
Yeah.
sorry. I'll
No,
ignore
no,
that.
the bad things are important to talk about.
Um, yeah, like, sometimes I think I put so much effort
Mm.
into being nice and understanding, and I mean it. And then other people just don't think that way. Other people don't care about being nice, and it kind of hurts because
Yeah,
I'm kind of like, my priority, my goal in life every day is to be a nice person and to
me
make
too.
someone feel happy.
Hmm.
Um, so
And you are.
like that is a good trait. It's just it has gotten me in situations where I've kind of felt disappointed by it because you give so much and you
Yeah.
get so little sometimes.
Yes, and that's
Um,
why you need to find your people, like the communities like
mhm.
ADHD Ireland, or you know, neurodiverse communities and
Yeah,
places like Spun Out, and even our friendship, and you know, family, and everyone that's super important in your life are going to benefit and give you the benefit of that relationship where you cultivate
exactly.
that
It's worth
understanding and
it for the
empathy.
ones that are worth it for.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. But no, sorry, there's actually one more thing, surprise, surprise.
Woo!
So I've never, like I said, I don't say many good things about myself, or I don't say I'm good at anything. But doing my work experience recently with these kids, I I hate saying good things about me, but I can confidently say, like, I'm good at this. I'm good
Yeah.
at helping kids who are neurodiverse. Obviously, as an SNA, you're also working with kids with physical disabilities, all kinds of
Mhm.
things, but I
Mhm.
really want to specialize in neurodiversity because of my own experience. And I
Yeah.
think it really helps me do this job.
Wow. Yeah, that's so important. And that's why I feel that psychiatrists and stuff can say all they want, but people who have lived experiences have so much more to offer on these topics.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it definitely makes you amazing. I always told you that
I
when you
know.
started, you were going to be amazing. And the way you talk about it, you are amazing at it.
Thank you.
So keep it up, even if there's going to be challenges, because the most important thing is being fulfilled in your job, and you will be
Yeah,
every day in something like that.
yeah, definitely.
Sorry. Oh Jesus.
What was
I
that?
went out of the app and I was like, oh
Oh,
no, am I still there? Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. And it's nice that, even though you're able to admit so kindly to open yourself up so much, that maybe you find it hard to be kind to yourself when you're expressing maybe the things you like about yourself. Maybe it's so important, both as neurodiverse people and maybe just people who are very self-critical in general, you should write, down, or even in your head mentally, just think about the things that are special about you. Because I could name 50 million things about you that are special,
Er,
very small things and very big
um,
things.
I love the writing down idea. We spoke about that the other day,
Yeah,
how writing down is helpful. But
yeah.
that's really, really helpful in being positive about yourself, because I
Hmm.
used to, when I was kind of in tough times and I wasn't feeling great, if someone sent me a nice message, I'd write it down. So I'd remember that,
Such a good
okay,
idea.
all of this is like this, but this person was nice to me and they like me. So not everyone hates me like I think they do.
Yeah, yeah,
So I think it's important to write any little thing down that makes you happy in the day. Like, this
yeah,
person smiled at me, or this, whatever just makes you feel good for even a split second, write it down,
yeah.
because that's what you need to remember when
Hmm.
it feels like none of that is possible. And it does
Yeah.
feel like that a lot of the time.
Yeah, and for neurodiverse people, our attentional abilities, and our attention to detail can sometimes stop us from seeing the bigger picture, especially about ourselves. We're
And we
often
tend
so
to focus
self-critical.
more towards the negative.
We definitely do. We have a predisposition to do that.
Hmm.
And those little things are so important. For me, it's looking back at past photos. For you, it may be that kind of journaling. Maybe it's even notes
Hmm.
in your phone, writing 3 positive things
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Anything like that is so beneficial. It's been shown to,
Mhm.
like, even in like something like 9 days of writing 3 positive things at the end of every day, there was something like a 90% increase in happiness in
Really?
people. Yeah.
Because in fairness,
Um,
like, I used to kind of be like, what's the point in that? Hardly
it's
that'll help.
so
But
accurate
it
psychologically.
really does. And I feel like a lot of people do think, oh yeah, good idea, but they won't do it because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, it won't really help that much.
But it will.
But it does.
Yeah. And the important thing is being proactive and trying to find what suits you. We're all different. And maybe if writing 3 positive things at the end of the day isn't for you, maybe writing a journal entry at the end of every week and maybe listing one thing that you did right. Like
Yeah.
on the mental health page, I always try to say, what's one small achievement that you've done this year? Because the big ones are great, but sometimes they're not the ones that mean the most to us. Maybe it's, I got out of bed every day before 5 p.m. Or maybe it's, I took a shower 4 times this week because I have sensory difficulties and that's hard for
Mm.
me. So it may be
Um,
those things that mean more than, like, I don't know. I like, obviously it's huge to qualify college,
mhm.
but sometimes to me, especially being neurodiverse, having some sort of routine and
Yeah.
structure is more positive for me than a qualification.
Yeah, you need to look out for the little things, because we're always just kind of putting
Forgetting.
too much pressure on ourselves.
Yeah,
But there was one more
entirely.
thing I was going to say there.
Sorry, I probably talked for too long.
Oh, no, you didn't. um, what was I going to say? I keep remembering it and then forget. Oh, yeah, I love that you have your page, your Instagram page, because um, I love that you have those things written about you. Because remember that time when you were really upset, like really down in the dumps, and I just sent you your own posts.
Yes.
Because
And I cannot relate to them,
yeah,
even though I know how to say it.
but
I
you can't
can't.
turn around and say it's not true, because it was true, because you
Yeah,
sent
I
it, you
wrote
wrote
it.
it down.
I
So
know, but that's ADHD for you.
yeah, but I love that that's there, and I'm
Oh,
gonna keep sending you those posts. And I think I wrote
do.
like, a wise woman once said.
Yeah, you did. And I
Yeah.
love that for you. You're so funny. Like, Jesus, 90% of the time you are hilarious. The other 10% of the time you're serious and you're there for me. But the 90% of the time is my favorite, because some of the things you
Good.
come out with is ridiculous and I love it. But yeah, thank you. I love the page. It wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the people who followed it, because the importance of it is that it's interactive. I don't give a shit if I have 10 followers, if I have 50 million followers. All I care about is interactive and people getting something out of it.
Exactly. That's the point. People who can relate to you.
Yeah, because I get loads out of it.
And you're amazing for putting yourself out there for people.
I do regret that 90% of the time. I go and archive all my posts, and then the next day I put them back up.
I think that's also
so
a
ashamed.
neurodivergent thing.
Oh yeah, self-criticalness,
like,
and also being ashamed of interactions.
regretting what you said,
Yeah,
regretting oversharing, thinking, why did I say that to that person? I shouldn't have done that. And then
how did we not touch on oversharing?
Yeah, I know.
And yeah, I shouldn't have said that. Shouldn't have. Oh my God, stop. Nights out, I'm especially, once I've had even one drink, I'm especially bad at oversharing.
Yeah,
or
me
talking
too.
too much. Yeah, but it's okay because we overshare together. We say it as it is.
Yeah.
And we're like, we'd go out for a drink or something, or like, I don't know, you'd come over or something, and it wouldn't be, oh, how are you? Oh yeah, good. How's the family? Blah, 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 which is nice too. But it's never like, oh, listen. It's always like, either I am great, I've done everything right today, everything is perfect, or it's, you know what, I hate everything. And I love that for us. So it's not oversharing.
We have the deepest conversations, but not in a serious way of like, oh, that's heavy.
Yeah.
I guess it's like we were saying earlier, the way our sense of humor and things like that. But we have the deepest conversations in the most natural way. It's not a heavy conversation. It's not like, we don't put pressure on ourselves to talk about things.
Down.
Yeah. But
then when it is serious, you're there for me, and I'm there for you as well.
I know when to stop sending memes.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, you will joke about things with me, and then maybe one day it gets so overwhelming and I'm crying, and you're there on that day also.
Yeah.
And maybe we joked about that thing like 2 nights before, and now I'm like crying, and you're, either way, you're there.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing. Yeah. Anyway, anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
I think we kind of covered everything. I
think we really did. I think this was so good.
Yeah, I liked talking about the similarities and the differences, like, especially, I know I've said this so many times now, but how there's so many similarities that are also like show in completely different ways.
That was
I love
interesting.
That. Yeah. So and the masking and talking about stigma and everything. I think we covered it.
Okay.
Pretty good.
Thank you so much for coming on. It was amazing to talk to you.
I feel famous now.
I do. You are famous. I talk to you every day anyway, but this was better. I'm joking. But yeah, no, it was so lovely to have you on, and thank you. And I'd love to have you on again.
Oh yeah, I have loads to say.
We're always talking about neurodiversity. Like, the thing about ADHD Ireland is it's not just ADHD. Neurodiversity is the most important thing.
And I love that.
Yeah, and
like I said at the beginning, it's a sense of community.
Yeah, and I'm so lucky to be volunteering for them for that reason.
And they're so lucky to have you.
Oh, thanks. But I'm luckier to have them. But being like volunteering for something so great is just, I'm so lucky,
Yeah.
And I'm lucky they gave me the opportunity to do the podcast, because I get to talk to so many amazing people who are neurodiverse, and I've talked to people whose families are neurodiverse and they're actually neurotypical, and getting all sides of things is just amazing. But this
it's fascinating, podcast, all of it.
Yeah.
All the different stories, and then at the end of the day, we all have that thing in common, neurodiversity. But
yes,
we all have our stories to tell, and that's why I love this podcast, because everyone can tell their story when not everyone, they have to come on the podcast, but
Oh
Yeah.
my god, that was perfect. I think that's where we're gonna end it because I love the literalness of what you just said.
I just noticed now.
Not everyone, like not all 7 billion people, but some people.
Well, there's an example for you that
I
just came
love
for
that.
free.
You get that for free. Some
Yeah,
people have to
didn't
pay
even
for
plan
that.
that one. Sometimes I go,
Honestly.
oh my god, is my autism showing?
Oh my god.
Because I saw
love that for
a
you.
SpongeBob meme of like Patrick saying, like, is my something showing? And I can't remember what it is. Ever since if I say something like literal or something, I'm thinking, is my
What does he
autism
say?
showing?
Oh, I got distracted there. Yes, and I sorry.
See, your
He's like,
ADHD is showing.
he's like, is my something showing? I
Yeah.
can't remember what
Yeah.
it is.
Mhm.
Anyway, yeah. Is my ADHD showing? That's my new
Yeah.
phrase. I love you for that.
Mhm.
That's what we're gonna call the episode. We're actually gonna call it "Is my neurodiversity showing?"
Great idea.
I think that's actually so good.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much. I love you, and I really
Aw, I love
appreciate you
you.
coming on today. I love you. I'm gonna.
And
Oh, go on.
I think it's great we both did this today because we were both not feeling great, and now I'm in a much better mood.
And that's another thing that makes us such good friends. I was like, "Do you know what, Becca? I just can't fucking do it today." And you were like, all right. And then you were like, I'll make sure you do it another time. And that is so supportive. And I love you for that.
This sounds so soppy, like so
here
soppy.
we go.
But no, whenever I hear your voice and you're smiling, it makes me so happy.
You can hear me smiling.
Yeah, you can hear when someone's smiling, you know?
Dude, I don't have that ability.
Just hearing like when you're in a good mood, I'm like, yay, and it makes me happy.
Oh, that's so sweet. You're gonna have to teach me. That's a autistic superpower right there.
I feel like normally it's the opposite, but I think I overthink it. It's like the way I overthink people's tones of voices, so it can go in the opposite way. Like you could sound like you're not smiling, and I'd be like, oh my god, what did I do wrong?
Imagine I just sounded the whole time like I was like just barely like opening my mouth, that I was just hating this conversation.
Oh god, I'd be so sad.
Yeah, no, don't worry, that'll never happen.
And then
I am
I'd be
smiling.
sad all night, and I'd be so confused about our friendship.
Well, there you go. Neurodiversity at its finest.
Yeah.
Instead of Tesco finest, it's just us on a package. Okay, right, that's it. I'm gonna
we better
end it now. One sec. Are you done?
Thank you for listening to Let's Chat, ADHD Ireland's first podcast hosted by me, Lauren McBride. You can find us on Instagram at ADHD Ireland, and I'm on there too, at Her Thoughts in Bright Colours. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'd love to hear your feedback and opinions on the topics covered each week. Sending positive vibes until we chat again.